The Atlanta Braves have the best record in baseball with the largest division lead in baseball. Is this the season to go all in at the trade deadline? Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today, a production of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, author of the Braves Today newsletter over at bravestoday.com. Braves beat the Red Sox last night. Just a little bit scary at the end there with Raisel Iglesias in the ninth, getting got by some bad locations, some batting averages on balls in play kind of issues, some BABIP shenanigans there. Not going to go into the whole game here on the podcast. You can go over to bravestoday.com. Today's three things is the game recap. We went pretty deep, actually, talking about what happened in that game, the good, the bad, and all of that. But outside of that, I want to talk about this team from a larger picture. When you look at the 2026 Atlanta Braves, we talked about the awards yesterday, about how they have Cy Young candidates, they have MVP candidates, they should have Manager of the Year candidates. This is one of the best teams in baseball. I don't think there's any way to argue that it's not. When you look at odds to win the World Series on Braves Today sponsor FanDuel, Braves are third with plus 1,000. It's Dodgers at plus 185 because we know that they don't really start trying until the postseason. Yankees at plus 500 because they're in the opposite league from the Dodgers. And then Braves at plus 1,000. And if things go chalk, the Braves would be facing the Dodgers in the NLCS with a chance to go to the World Series. And so I've seen a lot of conversation, different places, whether it's on social media, whether it's Atlanta Sports Radio, things like that, asking about the upcoming trade deadline in the end of July. Do the Braves go all in? Do you push in the chips? What do you need? And so let's talk about it. Let's talk about the decisions here and what you should do. Because what's tough for the Braves is Alex Anthopoulos in Atlanta has never been an all-in at the deadline kind of guy. He's done quantity hauls, right? You think about the 2021 deadline where you got 4 outfielders and they all proved very instrumental in getting you to the World Series and winning the World Series. Jock Peterson was the first one. And that was just, let's see if we can get a spark and go on a run. Let's see if this is enough of a boost to the club that we can go and buy in the next week and a half. And they did. And they get Eddie Rosario, they get Jorge Soler, they get Adam Duvall. And all of those guys proved instrumental, right? You had NLCS MVP, World Series MVP, like all of that. Jock had some big home runs in the wild card round. I think it was wild card round or the divisional series round, whatever, whenever they played the Brewers. And so, big deal. It worked out. But none of those guys were that expensive. And I think that's the part a lot of people forget is all of the deals that year were very cheap. The Braves got Rosario from Cleveland for Pablo Sandoval. And Cleveland immediately released Pablo Sandoval when he got there. They were just dumping the money and just getting rid of a player who was not working out. The Adam Duvall deal, I believe, was for like catcher Alex Jackson or something. None of these deals were that expensive. We've seen, what we've not really seen in Atlanta from Alex Anthopoulos is him giving up significant assets to get really good players. A lot of these deadline acquisitions are money related, right? Think about when you got Raisel Iglesias from the Angels. You got that for Jesse Chavez. Chavez lasted 2 weeks and then came back. Like they let him go and he came back. And I wrote this up early in May over at bravestoday.com and broke everything into a couple categories. The usual kind of deals into a couple categories. The first one was the classic Anthopoulos move. And the way that I explained the classic Anthopoulos move is it's a little cute. right? It's not an obvious, immediate, holy cow, this player is fantastic kind of situation. It is a Tyler Kinley, Pierce Johnson, even Aaron Bummer, although that wasn't a deadline move, but those were all like talented reliever with an outlier pitch that are in a bad situation and we can make them better. Pierce Johnson worked out. Tyler Kinley, for the most part, has worked out. Aaron Bummer was working out until it wasn't. It was working out until they extended the contract a year too far, and then the age monster just kind of got him. The age monster and the shoulder injury monster kind of got him. They've also had, we'll take all of the money to get the player moves, right? Raisel Iglesias was a great example there. Jorge Soler, when they got him, they later traded him away, but that was we're just going to take that contract off your hands. There's also the thing that they've never really done in Atlanta, which is that big swing. And we've seen teams make these big swings. Think about the Dodgers getting Max Scherzer and Trey Turner. That was a big swing. That was the rental player on an expiring deal we're renting you for a few months and then you're going to free agency. We're just going to ride you through the end of the season. You want to produce because you want to get a big contract. We want you to produce because we want to win. There's a lot of options there. And we're going to get into some of these options and things like that a little bit later. We're going to actually discuss the different categories of guys and get into some of that. And then there's the sneaky fits where this one is a talented player. They probably have additional control. We weren't necessarily expecting this kind of deal, but it could work out. I feel like those are really the three types of deals at the deadline, right? The cute move that makes sense if you do some work, the big swing, and then just the sneaky, oh, this makes a ton of sense. I just didn't necessarily think about this. But to me, of any year for you to decide, do we go in at the trade deadline? Like, the Braves are going to acquire pieces. Let's be clear. They're going to go out and get pieces at the deadline. Just about every competitor, every contender actually does that. Every contender does, if for no other reason just than to get a reliever or two. But the Braves are going to acquire. And the thought process for me is figuring out, okay, what do the Braves need? Let's talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. But first, this episode is brought to you by IQ Bar, our exclusive snack, hydration, and coffee sponsor. IQ Bar protein bars, IQ Mix hydration mixes, and IQ Joe mushroom-infused coffees are the delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel you need to win your day. The Ultimate Sampler Pack is a great way to try all the IQ Bar products and flavors. You get 9 IQ Bars, 8 IQ Mix sticks, and 4 IQ Joe sticks. And all of their products are clean label certified. They're free from all of the things that either people are allergic to or just don't really want to eat. Gluten, dairy, soy, GMOs, artificial ingredients, and bad vibes. With over 20,000 5-star reviews and counting, more people than ever are fueling their busy lifestyles with IQ Bar's brain and body boosting bars, hydration mixes, and mushroom-infused coffees. And that Ultimate Sampler Pack includes all 3. Right now, IQ Bar is offering Braves Today listeners 20% off of all IQ Bar products, including the Ultimate Sampler Pack, plus free shipping. To get your 20% off, text MLB to 64000. That's MLB to 64000. That's MLB to 64000. Messages and data rates may apply. See terms for details. If the Braves make serious deals at the deadline, because again, they're going to do something. Even when they were supposed to be sellers, they kept their guys and they went out and they got Tyler Kinley. So the Braves are going to do something. The question is, how big is the something? And there's a couple teams that I'm watching for. I personally think that this needs to be a bigger deadline. The Braves are in a position where the farm system, after those years of no international signings, the farm system has rebounded. You have arguably more talent than you ever have. And I think especially on the pitching side, you are in a situation where there are realistically more pitching prospects than you are going to have spots for, even with average to slightly above average levels of attrition because of injury. There's just so many arms that you have in the minors that could be MLB players, but probably would not for you. This goes back to that impact starter argument, right? If you think about 2027's potential rotation, you think about the team control you have and what you're going to do. You're going to have Chris Sale. You're going to have Spencer Strider. You're going to have Spencer Schwellenbach. And I'm just going to name guys who are eligible. I'm not saying they're all going to be in the rotation, but Ronaldo Lopez, Grant Holmes, Hurston Waldrop, Didier Fuentes, J.R. Ritchie, A.J. Smith-Shawver. Those are just the guys who have debuted. That doesn't count prospects who could debut. That's literally just the guys who have already pitched in the majors and the guys that are currently injured. That doesn't count something like an Owen Murphy, who is in AAA and could potentially debut. That doesn't count turning Victor Medeiros or Anthony Molina back into major league contributors. That doesn't count bringing back Martin Perez. That doesn't count minor league free agent Austin Gomber, who you got out of Texas's system 2 weeks ago. That doesn't count AAA prospects who could move up here by then. Garrett Bowman, Lucas Braun. Maybe there's something left of Drew Hackenberg. You can very easily see how Atlanta can go into spring training with 10 starting pitching options. And I'm not saying do what Boston did and tear everything down and get rid of them all. But I'm saying you could do what Boston did, and you can say, these are the ones that are least likely to debut for us, or least likely to earn a rotation spot long-term from us. And these are going to be our draft capital. In the trades they made with St. Louis, they moved, I believe it ended up being 4 different starting pitching prospects. Some of them were pretty close to the majors. Some of them had already debuted. Some of them were in AAA this year or on track to debut this year. But they were all guys that didn't project to be as good as the guys they ended up going with, right? Connerly Early, Peyton Tolley. Obviously, they had added Sonny Gray. They had added Ranger Suarez to go with Garrett Crochet. They already had Brayan Bello. They kind of had their 6 guys. And they said, if you're not in that, I guess really it's more than that, because they also had injuries to Cutter Crawford and Tanner Houck and Johan Oviedo and Patrick Sandoval. They had a list of 9 starters. And they said, if you're not on this top 9, you're going to go. And it's hard to argue that, yes, they got hit by injuries pretty hard, but it's difficult to argue that wasn't a good plan for them. They lost 2 starters in spring, like we did. I guess Crochet was in April. But the point is, they made a top 9. And they said, if you're not in that top 9, we're going to trade you away to make the team better. And that was in the offseason. But you could see Atlanta do something like that this year. You have the capital to do that. The same way you have a lot of position players who are getting more attention than usual. They are like this prospect group is considered one of the better ones for the Braves in a while. And of the position players, you're not going to be able to keep all of them, right? First base is going to be filled for a while. Third base projects to be filled for a while. Catcher, filled for a while. Center field, filled for a while. You're going to have openings at shortstop and second base. You're going to have openings in left field. You could maybe have an opening in right field. We don't know how that's going to go. Even if Ronald resigns, does he go to DH, etc.? But you are in a situation where you have a lot of guys on expiring deals. Final year of Ha-Sung Kim. I know he's not done much for you yet, but final year for Ha-Sung Kim. Final year for Raisel Iglesias. Final year of Martin Perez, Dom Smith, Jorge Mateo. Potentially the final year of Ozzie Albies and Tyler Kinley. They're going to pick up Ronald's option. Let's not even act like that's going to be not something they do. They're going to pick up Ronald's option. But you've got a lot of arms. Mauricio Dubon, final year of Mauricio Dubon. You've got a lot of guys potentially walking after this year. This is the year to go deep. This is the year to push. This is the year to move prospect capital, provided that you maintain the depth you need for future years. Part of the reason the Braves have never been super aggressive with these deals has been their need to ensure the pipeline is still there and you're keeping a long competitive window. And that's the right way to approach this. But when you look at the specter of additional money from Braves Vision that you didn't have from the FanDuel deal, which again was the worst broadcast deal in MLB. One of the worst broadcast deals in the three major sports where FanDuel did business. And my evidence for that is when the holding company that ran FanDuel Sports Networks went to bankruptcy. They asked the bankruptcy court to let them drop every single MLB, NHL, NBA deal they had but Atlanta's, but the Braves. That's the only one they wanted to keep was this one because it was so cheap. They were making money hand over fist on the difference between what they charged advertisers and what they had to pay Atlanta. So you're potentially going to have more money to help supplement if you end up if you trade away prospects. You have a better farm system with an infusion of position player talent, both from the draft, from internal development, and from international free agency. You're reaching an inflection point on a bunch of pitching prospects. That wave, that J.R. Ritchie, Owen Murphy wave is cresting. And you've got guys who are getting ready to be in line for their debut, and you may not have room for them. I'm not saying trade down all of the pitching prospects and be left with 5 guys. But I'm saying you can realistically look at 10 to 15 guys that may debut in the next 2 years and say, if we assume a normal rate of attrition on these, how many can we afford to lose because they don't project to be in the top half of our rotation? And while Alex Anthopoulos has never been super aggressive as far as quality at the deadline for the Braves, he has done it in the past. If you go back and you look at his tenure in Toronto, he made some massive moves, both offseason and trade deadline. 2009, he dumped Roy Halladay to the Phillies. He got Travis d'Arnaud in that deal, by the way. 2012, he made a bunch of big deals. He traded Travis d'Arnaud and Noah Syndergaard to the Mets to get reigning Cy Young winner R.A. Dickey. And Dickey wasn't the same guy that he in Toronto as he was in New York, but he was pretty close. And then he wasn't the same guy when we got him in Atlanta, but he made a massive deal with the Marlins to get Jose Reyes, to get Mark Burley, to get Josh Johnson. 2015, he traded third baseman Brett Lowry and some minor leaguers to the A's to get Josh Donaldson ahead of his MVP season. He won the MVP for Toronto. And then the 2015 deadline. This is the one that I'm thinking of when I think about AA making big swings and going big. He got David Price from the Tigers, back when David Price was a superstar. He got shortstop Troy Tulowitzki from the Rockies. He got Ben Revere from the Phillies. And because of a lot of the stuff that he did at the 2015 deadline, the Blue Jays went 43-18 after the deadline, won the AL East, made the playoffs. If I remember right, that was the first time in 20 years or so that they made the playoffs. Like he went all out to make sure that they were going to have an opportunity to make the postseason, and they did. And we've seen him do some of those aggressive trades in the offseason here in Atlanta. The Matt Olson deal was a very aggressive move. A lot of prospect capital leaving. The Sean Murphy deal was a very aggressive move. A quality player in William Contreras and some prospect capital leaving. So we've seen that part of it. We've not seen the deadline part of it. And part of me is wondering if it's on the way. And so if he looks to make deals at the deadline this year aggressively, what positions might he target and what players might be available? There's a couple teams specifically that I'm looking at. We'll talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today. We're going to try our best to be realistic here, okay? I understand the desire when you talk about trade acquisitions to go say all of the big names, right? The Braves are not going to go trade for Tarek Skubal. It's not going to happen. The Braves are not going to trade for Mike Trout. It's not going to happen. But let's look at the teams. Let's figure out, hey, where could they potentially go? And I think one of the big things that I've heard a lot, and it makes sense if you think about it, is looking for a bat. Looking for a big bat. And one of the dream players, and we know that this is probably the dream because they have tried to do this before, is getting Byron Buxton from the Twins. This is a very complicated deal because Byron Buxton has a no-trade clause, and Byron Buxton has been outspoken that he does not want to leave Minnesota. He said that all last year. He said it at the All-Star game. He said at the trade deadline. He renewed it in the offseason. That being said, there is always a possibility that he will agree to waive that no-trade clause. It is a full no-trade clause. Next year, starting in 27, it becomes a 5-team trade list. And you're going to hear people say that's going to be a factor. That won't be a factor because he'll have 10 and 5 rights. So let's be clear. If somebody dives into that contract a little bit and says, hey, his full no-trade clause becomes a 5-team trade list, doesn't matter. He has 10 and 5 rights, meaning 10 years in the league and the last 5 with the same team that he's on, meaning he can block any trade. So just heads up on that. But it's important to point out he is from Baxley, Georgia. He went to Abilene County High School. I was told in the offseason that he was building a new home in Baxley, a larger home for the offseason. And so if he does agree to get moved, Atlanta is the logical destination. Again, no guarantees it'll happen. But you would owe him the prorated portion of his $15 million salary for this year, and then 15.14 million in each of 27 or 28. He does have some small performance incentives that come around plate appearances, and these stack. I think it would go up to $2.5 million total if he hit all of the plate appearance incentives. He does have MVP bonuses. I don't think we would be opposed if a guy earned extra money because he had a top 10 finish for MVP, all the way up to potentially winning the thing. I don't think we'd care that much if we had to pay that. Again, we don't typically do performance incentives and deals. This would be inherited here. But if you look at where he is right now, 46 games in, he's hitting .258 with an .886 OPS. He's got 16 home runs, only 4 stolen bases. He stole 24 last year, but it's fine. So yeah, 16 home runs, on base of .319. Absolutely a scenario where you would likely stick him over in left field because you have Michael Harris in center. But it would give you the ability when you are facing a righty to rotate an outfielder through DH. You can rotate Ronald through DH. You can rotate Buxton through DH. You can give Michael Harris a DH day and stick Buxton in center. Mike Yastrzemski can just move to whichever outfield spot is going through DH, unless it's Harris. I'd put Buxton in center and Yastrzemski in left, but that would be the most impactful all-around player that you could get. And there's a couple other twins that would be interesting as well from different perspectives, relievers and things like that. There's been a lot of talk, especially on Atlanta Sports Radio, about Yordan Álvarez. This one is tougher and is going to be significantly more expensive because Yordan Álvarez is a top 5 hitter in baseball. And he has multiple years of control. So this would be a very expensive deal. Because Buxton has that leverage. Because Buxton has the no trade clause. That deal could potentially not be as difficult to get done. A Yordan Álvarez deal would hurt if you are making a deal with the Astros. The return for that, off the top of my head, would probably be something like 2 or 3 top prospects, at least, plus something else, right? So think about, okay, it's probably Cam Caminiti and Owen Murphy or J.R. Ritchie. They probably want Ritchie because he's major league already. And something else. Maybe a Tate Southesine. Maybe an Eric Hartman. Maybe a John Heel. It's probably going to be 3 of your top 10 prospects. And that's probably the floor. It probably gets a little bit different if there's other, depending on how many teams are in there. But the flip side of that deal would be you getting, again, a top 5 bat in baseball into your lineup for this year and 27 and 28. He's making $26.8 million in each year of the deal. So you'd have the prorated portion of that for the final month plus of the season, the final 2 months of the season, And then you'd have that full freight in 27 and 28, his age 30 and 31 seasons. This is probably the most possibly realistic deal that could come. And again, it would hurt. But you would be adding a guy who's hitting .303 right now with a league-leading .631 slug, a league-leading 1.46 OPS, leads the league in total bases with 125, and is mostly a DH, but can go stand in left field for you as well. Again, it would hurt. It would be by far the biggest trade Alex Anthopoulos has made during his tenure in Atlanta. But you could do it. You could do it. What feels more likely to me is going one of those categories I talked earlier and making some smaller deals. Talented reliever with an outlier pitch in a bad situation. Give me Ryan Zeferjahn from the Angels. If you're taking all of the money to get the player, Andrew Kittredge of the Orioles, right-handed veteran pitcher. He's been terrible this year. Maybe they decide they don't want him, but something like that. Maybe they just go and grab an outfielder on an expiring deal. It wouldn't have to be as big as Yordan Álvarez. George Springer could be an option. Taylor Ward of the Orioles, not that I'm a fan of that, but Taylor Ward of the Orioles. Jorge Soler is ostensibly an outfielder. Maybe you grab a lefty reliever with control. And let me clarify here, because everybody says this. Let me clarify here. You don't have to get a lefty reliever. You just have to get a reliever that can get lefties out. Typically, a left-handed reliever can get lefties out. So that's why we say lefty reliever. But in reality, it doesn't have to be a lefty reliever. It just has to be a guy who can get left-handers out. Eric Miller of the Giants. The Giants appear to not be doing much. If they were willing to move him, he has a lot of control. But that'd be an appealing target. John King of the Marlins. It's in division. That's hard, but there you go. Jacob Latz of the Rangers. Daniel Lynch of the Royals. All these guys have additional control. They're lefty relievers. There are starting pitchers that do have some additional control. Joe Ryan of the Twins, very expensive. I imagine he's going to go for more than Atlanta's going to want to pay. But Sandy Alcantara, the Marlins, I don't see them trading Sandy at this point unless they just completely collapse. Seth Lugo of the Royals has a 28 club option. They're still contending. It's hard to imagine they let him go, but guys that I'm thinking about that could be sneaky fits. Serathony Dominguez of the White Sox. First year of a 2-year, $20 million deal. He has a homer rate that is outside of his norms. It feels like it's primed to regress back, like what happened to Raisel Iglesias last year. He had that outlier homer rate early in the year. They took him out of the closer role. They put him back in the closer role, and it was fine the rest of the year. Taylor Rogers of the Twins. He's a side-arming lefty on an AL Central team that's having a down year. Sweeper, slider, cutter. He used to get a lot of ground balls. He was struggling on the ground balls this year. He could be your new lefty ground ball specialist in place of Aaron Bummer. Like Lars Nootbaar of the Cardinals. The Cardinals have a bunch of outfielders. Jordan Walker's broken out. They've rotated a lot of guys in left field. Nootbaar is supposed to come back this weekend. They could potentially want to give him the job and intend to compete and keep him all year. They could decide to move him at the deadline because he only has one additional year of control. Maybe Atlanta's like, hey, we'll do that as additional insurance so we don't have to count on and or we can just cut Jerickson Profar after this year. And that would give you a deadline of the end of 27 to figure out left field going forward. Because Nootbaar would be walking, Mike Yastrzemski would be walking. And you'd have Ronald in one corner, Harrison center, and a bunch of prospects, and you'd have to look at free agents and all of that to fill the left field hole going forward. And I'm personally torn on this. I want the Braves to make a big move. I want the Braves to make a big splash and not go all in, but to acknowledge that, hey, we are looking to win the whole dang thing. I want Atlanta to do that. At the same time, I think they have to do it responsibly. The Braves can't afford, and the Braves would never sell the entire farm. I think Anthopoulos learned that lesson in Toronto with some of the very good pieces that he ended up moving, and how they quickly became the oldest roster in the league. And as those guys all kind of hit aging curves, he struggled to have prospects to replace them. The Braves are one of the oldest teams in the league, but that reason is because of their supplemental pieces, right? Chris Sale and his age, Raisel Iglesias and his age, Mike Yastrzemski and his age. The core, your core of Ronald and Olsen and Riley and Baldwin and even Murphy, like that core, Schwellenbach and Strider, they're all young. So I think he's learned the lessons of Toronto. Is he willing to dip his toes into the giant, massive deadline trade again? That's what we'll find out. That'll do it for Braves today. Please like the video, please subscribe. Quick programming note, because Thursday's an earlier game, we're not going to have a standard episode out at noon because the scouting report will drop like 30 minutes later. And YouTube just really doesn't like when you do those shows back to back, and nobody watches either one of them really. So probably not going to be a standard show tomorrow unless something massive happens today and we got to talk about it, which is possible. Last time I said this was last week in Miami for the Tuesday show, and then Aaron Bummer was so bad that he got released, not even DFA, just released. And so I ended up doing a show on Tuesday morning anyway. So likely not going to be a show tomorrow unless something massive happens tonight or in the morning. But that'll do it for Braves today. Please like the video, please subscribe. We'll see you next time.